forum in March, as well as today, is punctuated by a series of what we're calling art trade tales, in which we follow the particular journey of a modernist work, generally, through its lifetime. We've asked the Art Dubai Modern curators to each pick a work that is having a dynamic journey through different hands and different art worlds, and and works that in particular illustrate how the art world lives and breathes through exchange. So at the Global Art Forum in March, the curators Catherine David, Christine Khouri, Iftikhar Dadi and Nada Shabout, all of whom advise Art Dubai Modern, will each contribute an art trade tale that draws on a particular history. But tonight we invited Myrna, who everyone will know as a writer and editor working in Dubai for many, many years, and now director of Art Dubai. We've passed on the baton from one to another. And Myrna starts this storytelling with an extraordinary portrait of a moment of exchange. So over to you, Myrna.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Antonia. I wanted to thank you first. You had mentioned earlier, I thought what you said was, pretty poignant. The whole idea of giving and receiving, and how when you gift somebody something, you gift a part of yourself as well. I thought that was really, really poignant. And then that got me thinking that we're actually all trading right now. So we're trading tales, and then I started to think even more that I think Global Art Forum has always been trading as well. So thank you to Shumon, Oscar, and Antonia for inviting me to talk about a subject that I find particularly fascinating. I'm going to try and tell you how a 10th century Persian poet has a lot to do with an abstract expressionist artist called William De Kooning. So let me just start by telling you this is Ferdowsi. He's Persian, and he is recognized as one of the most influential figures in Persian history and literature. For 33 years he wrote something called the Shahnameh, which translates to the Book of Kings. He was known also as the Lord of the Word. And the Shahnameh basically told us the story, the mythical and historic past of Persia through its kings. And it started at the creation of the Persian Empire through to the Islamic conquest. This is William De Kooning. He's a Dutch-American abstract expressionist artist whose contemporaries were Rothko and Pollock, and he was working in New York in the 1950s. In 1950, he started a series called Woman. This was right after he met his wife, and he created a total of 6 paintings. Woman, well, 1 through to 6, they're between the Carnegie Museum of Art, the MoMA. One was at the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. This is the one that I want to talk about today. And the National Gallery of Australia and the Nelson Atkins Museum. This is Shah Tahmasp. Every Shah that ruled Persia commissioned his court to create the Shahnameh, to illustrate it basically. The most important Shahnameh ever produced is the one produced under Shah Tahmasp's reign. And he was the longest ruling Safavid ruler of the Safavid dynasty. He was actually quite the big art patron, and he was pretty fond of miniatures. So he commissioned this Shahnameh. In total, it was 759 pages. It was written in Nastaliq script, and there were 258 illustrations. It was created in Tabriz. Total size was about 40 by 30 centimeters. And it was gifted to Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Sultan. When it went from Tabriz to Istanbul, it was between, there was like a whole procession that went there, so it was like a major gift-giving ceremony. And it took about 15 years to produce. When it got to Turkey, it stayed in Topkapi Palace. These are some examples of the Shahnameh that are now in the collection of the Met. So you will see Uzma was referring earlier to the material lapis lazuli. This was crushed. It was brought in from Afghanistan. There was some sort of beetle whose outer shell was crushed for the red. So it was quite the elaborate work. There was way more than, there were dozens and dozens of artists who produced the Shahnameh. Now, we don't know how it ended up with a member of the Rothschild family in 1903. We don't know if it was officially sold or we don't know if it was traded, but it ended up in his hands, and he was a major art patron. He also donated thousands and thousands of works to the Louvre, and he then sold it to a man called Arthur Houghton. So this was Baron de Rothschild, and this is Arthur Houghton, who is the chairperson of the Metropolitan Museum, big industrialist New Yorker family. Katharine Hepburn is a Houghton too. Huge bibliophile, patron of the arts as well. And he was a Harvard graduate, which is where he developed an obsession with manuscripts. In the 1970s, he took a few pieces apart, but I mean nothing ridiculous, just to exhibit them in some museums. This is, now we've moved on to, in parallel, we have the Pahlavi dynasty, which this is an image of the Shah crowning Farah Pahlavi in 1967. This is the height of the Iranian monarchy. The petrodollars were coming in. She was the first female to be recognized as a queen, and so if the Shah would pass away, the queen would rule. She was a huge patron of the arts as well, and using the petrodollars that came into Iran, started opening cultural institutions and museums, and not just in Tehran, but all over. This is the queen with Salvador Dali. Whoops. This is her cousin, Kamran Diba, whom she commissioned to create the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. This is an archival image of Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art, which was opened on the Queen's birthday in October 14th, 1977. That's Andy Warhol at the bazaar in Iran. So he had gone to Iran at the time. And this is Andy Warhol with the Queen for portraits that the Pahlavis had commissioned of the royal family. The acquisitions for the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art started really with Kamran Diba, who gave the Queen a list of suggested paintings and other artworks to buy. And they decided that the remit was going to be from the post-impressionist era through to post-war. And so there was a director that was appointed, Mr. Bahadari, who went on basically a buying spree, who bought lots of fantastic paintings for tens of thousands of dollars. I'm going to show you some of them. Oh, so this is Arnaldo Pomodoro, is on the grounds of the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. This is the entrance. That's a Henry Moore over there. The figures on the left, that's a Magritte, and then you have the figures on the right. They're Giacometti's, the walking man of Giacometti in the edition of 6. One of them was sold a couple of years ago to Lili Safra for about 106 million pounds. These are the Giacometti's. And that's the René Magritte. And this is one of the paintings that was also bought. This is William de Kooning's Woman No. 3. That's Khomeini up there, and that's an Alexander Calder in the entrance of the museum. I'd taken these pictures when I, as a journalist, went to cover the Farid El Ashai retrospective in November 2015. That was a show that was curated by Germano Celant and Faryar Jahavarian, when they took artworks out of the Tehran Museum vault and exhibited them alongside Farideh's works. These are some more, oops. So Ooh, wow. These are some more images of the main show. That central painting over there, that's a bacon. Sorry, and the one on the right is another De Kooning. These are some of the Impressionist works, so Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. And that's the Pollock, and that is two Sohrab Sepehris. He's an Iranian modernist in the center, and then you have a great Rothko on the right, the left. At this point, with the spending spree that the Pahlavis were doing, Arthur Houghton then suggested to the Pahlavis that I have the Shahnameh, why don't you buy it? And they said, okay. And he said, I want $20 million. And they said, you're mad. That's a crazy amount of money. He said, no, this is the price. They didn't end up buying it. And so he then started to take the manuscript apart. And pages started to appear at Christie's and Sotheby's auctions. So there are a sample at the Aga Khan Museum, some in the private collection of Nasser Khalili, others at the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, the Pergamon. So everybody had a little bit of the Shahnameh. By which time, obviously, the product was, well, not damaged, but devalued in a sense. And then the revolution happened. Pahlavis were out. The Islamic Revolution came in 1979. The works that were acquired for the museum were then locked away in a vault, and since the revolution till now have probably been exhibited 3 times, but not in their entirety. Enter a man called Oliver Hoare. Oh, sorry, this is just an image. I was actually granted access to the vaults of the Tehran Museum, and so that's Khomeini, and then a 1971 Picasso in the background. So this is the vault where all these precious artworks are stored, and I just want to show you. So that's what you see when you first go in. This image is the wrong way around, but I mean, this is the way they'd stored them. I know that some of you can maybe see this. They're in Arabic, but in Farsi, but they're handwritten. So it says Jackson Bullock, okay, and then Mark Rothko. So it's all handwritten, and this is their archiving, sort of, you know. These are some more Victor Vasarely and some others. This is the way some of them are hung. Again, here's some more. And this is the famous Pollock triptych, which has never been exhibited in its entirety because it's quite sensual. These are 2 works by Iranian modernists. The one on the left is Bahman Muhassis. The one on the right is Munir Farman Farmayan. So these were also acquired. The whole premise of this museum was for the Iranian works to hang on alongside their Western counterparts. That's another Rothko. And this is Oliver Hoare. So Oliver Hoare is an amazing Islamic art specialist and dealer. He's credited for having established the Christie's Islamic department. So when the Houghton Shahnameh, when Arthur Houghton died, his son decided that he wanted to sell the rest of the work. He didn't want to take it apart anymore. And they sought the advice of Oliver Hoare. The reason this happened is that there was a Christie's sale in 1988. And they had 12 manuscripts from the Shahnameh that kind of tanked. And they were worried that if these tanked, it would bring the whole value of the Shahnameh down. So they asked him to help. He initially suggested that the Iranian diaspora gather their money together to buy the rest of the Shahnameh and then put it in the Met, because the Met had 78 pieces by then. But the Iranians didn't want to spend any money, and there wasn't enough money to raise. And so Arthur then decided, why don't we do a swap? And so he approached the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. Well, he approached the Iranian government first. He sent a letter, and he heard from them after 6 months. And he told me over the phone last week that instead of meeting a very conservative guy, he actually met a guy who liked wine. And they had lunch in Paris, and they discussed the swap. Now, this was in 1990. it took a total of 4 years for this deal to come through. Just so you know, Oliver speaks Farsi fluently and lived for a time in Iran, and so Iran is very dear to his heart, and the Shahnameh is even dearer. He proposed in the beginning for the Tehran Museum to swap the Pollock or a Rothko, but he realized later on that the Iranians knew exactly what they were doing from the beginning. Although the official statement is, we suggested that they take the De Kooning because it's lewd. The real reason we will never know, but it's not because of that, otherwise they would have taken the bacon. He told me a story. When the deal was actually going to happen, they decided to meet in London for the Iranians to inspect the Shahnameh and for him to inspect the De Kooning. But 2 days before that meeting, an Iranian terrorist bombed the Israeli embassy in London. And so they had to reroute, and they had to have the meeting in Paris. As per the insurance policy and whatever other laws, the Shahnameh had to be in Oliver's vision 24 hours a day. So he booked the first class of British Airways, all 12 seats, well actually 11 because it was him and then, sorry, 1, it was just him, and then the 11 seats were for the Shahnameh. Flew to Paris, met with the Iranians, everything was okay. But then on his way out, so back from London, Paris to London, the Parisians are like, no, you can't go and you can't take this with you. And he said, no, I've got all the paperwork. And they said, no, sorry, you can't go. So he's got this trolley with the crate, and he's asked to go see the head of customs. So on his way into the guy's office, makes a run for it, gets on the flight. This is like such an Argo scene. Makes a run for it, gets on the flight, and there he is back with the crate in the first class lounge, makes it back to London. So the deal happens. It was supposed to happen in Switzerland, but again, the Iranian government didn't have a great relationship with the Swiss, so we decided, well, not we decided, but they decided to do the trade on the tarmac of Vienna airport. So the flight, the presidential flight carrying the William de Kooning lands, and then the other flight carrying the Shahnameh lands, and Oliver Hoare is there with the Minister of Culture, and he tells me we just started laughing hysterically, and we embraced each other because they both knew at that very moment no amount of paintings would ever equate to the value of the Shahnameh. So really, whoever was buying it on the other end, it was peanuts. The deal also stipulated that they don't talk about the price, although there have been rumors that they were valued at 20 million each. Now, obviously, there was a buyer ready for the De Kooning, and that was an American art collector called David Geffen. David Geffen then sold the De Kooning to Stephen Cohen for $137 million. So that kind of gives you an idea of the value of what's inside that vault. When the deal happened, Her Majesty called the museum pretending to be a student because she was so distraught that this had happened. And the person on the other end of the line said, I know who you are, but I just wanted you to know they forced us. What that means, we don't know. A couple of years later as well, Her Majesty was sitting in a coffee shop in Paris with her daughter and met some dealer who came and said to her, you know, I just wanted to tell you that I've been trying to deal with these Iranians and try and do another swap to get some artworks, but my hair is turning white trying to deal with them. And she says to him, well, I hope you turn bald trying to do that. I wanted to just close my talk, incidentally, with something that Ferdowsi wrote in the Shahnameh. This is how he signed it off. I've reached the end of this great history, and all the land will talk of me. I shall not die. These seeds I've sown will save my name and reputation from the grave, and men of sense and wisdom will proclaim, when I have gone, my praises and my fame. And that's it. Sorry, I just want to tell you this. Oh, Okay, that wasn't it, but I just had two images of Stephen Cohen and David Geffen, so you know who they are, that's all. That's David Geffen, and that's Stephen Cohen. Thank you.